Chaos Heads is a well-regarded visual novel released on the 25th of April 2008 in Japan and only Japan. Shortly after this, on July the 26th, it was announced that it would be getting an anime adaptation, which would begin airing on October the 9th of the same year. The story shows us the life of Takumi Nishijo, an anime-obsessed recluse with a fetish for two-dimensional girls, the home video releases words, not mine, who gets entangled in Tokyo's new-gen madness after Shogun, a mysterious netizen, sends him a photo of what seems to be someone nailed to a wall near his school, which prompts Takumi to investigate on the way home. The New Gen Madness, a series of horrific murders taking place around Tokyo, and perpetrated apparently by the girl Takumi saw at the image's location. It's the most talked about thing in school, online, and even on the streets. Thanks to Takumi getting caught running away from the crime scene by a nearby security camera, he's now the prime suspect of the murders, which doesn't help his crippling paranoia, which causes him to imagine the absolute worst in any given situation. Over the course of the visual novel, and by extension the anime, we get Takumi's perspective as the hunted, and the detectives assigned to the New Gen Madness cases as the hunters, making for a thrilling ride as both parties get closer to who the actual killer is. Chaos Head's anime adaptation was animated by Studio Madhouse, who, if you didn't know, animated Death Note's anime adaptation 2 years prior, with Toshiki Inoue writing 22 episodes. He comes back for this adaptation as the screenplay writer for every episode, hence the From the Minds That Brought You Death Note, on the Western DVD and Blu-ray case. But that's just the adaptation. Studio Madhouse and any staff who worked on both of these projects of course are not the original creators of both Death Note and Chaos Head. So to me that quote feels a bit cheap, but I do understand where they're coming from, both from the obvious promotional angle, but also because of the elements the original works share. So if you enjoyed Death Note, you might like Chaos Head, just not the anime adaptation. Now that quote about it being from the minds of Death Note is reaching a bit, but whatever, I get it. What about the quotes on the top of the case? The first from Casey Brienza of AnimeNewsNetwork.com, scoring the first episode 3.5 out of 5 or a 7 out of 10, but Carl Kimlinger, oh man. So not only did they grab 2 reviews from the same site, they cherry-picked this one light out of Carl's review, because the rest of it is quite negative. Just look at the first paragraph summarising the series plot. You want horror? Chaos Head stirs the freakiest things in anime-twisted wish fulfillment, disturbed otaku, harems, into a stew of gore and techno-horror a la Pulse. And then wraps it all in that air of anime peculiar to visual novel adaptations. Talk about scary. Now, I do get the whole anime wish fulfillment thing. Chaos Head literally centres around a shut-in loner, his shelf lined with anime figures and rubbish lying around his room, which is actually a cargo box. He lives in a cargo box. And yet all of these girls suddenly appear before him, and they're all telling him he's important in some way, so like, you know, fair enough, you got me there. But obviously there's a lot more to it than that, which is very evident the more you get through the visual novel. But in the anime I didn't really feel any of that, mostly because of the pacing. Carl says the series is wrapped in that air of anime peculiar to visual novel adaptations, and he's exactly right. Visual novel adaptations have always ranged from god-awful to peak, but still not as good as the original in some eyes. You could also say the same for manga adaptations, but with those, the best adaptations are usually seen as objectively superior because of the animation, music and voice acting when compared to black and white artwork. That of course does look great, but seeing it animated and looking just as good as the original artwork is amazing. There's a lot of manga adaptations that have changed, removed, or even added material in some cases, which leads to horrific adaptations of great manga. But especially nowadays, most manga adaptations are one for one. What happens in the manga also happens in the anime. The only thing that can make them worse is the animation, voice acting and music. Visual novels do not have the luxury of being easily adaptable into anime. They obviously include reading just like manga, but unlike books and light novels whose adaptations can cover a few volumes or a whole book, visual novels are usually one extremely long game. One of the highest rated visual novels of all time is Muv-Luv Alternative, the final visual novel in the Muv-Luv trilogy, and on its own it's about 55 hours long. That's a lot of reading. If that got an adaptation, it probably needs something like 60 episodes or more to fully include everything and pace it well. And it did get an anime adaptation that was 24 episodes long, with the first episode being anime original, so basically 23 episodes, or something like 9.5 hours to cover the whole 55-hour experience. That adaptation has its own unique problems too, but VNs are so long that a good adaptation would need to be double the length of a 2-core anime series, which results in the majority not really being that good. They really just function as extra material for fans, or as a way to sell the VN to newcomers. And that's forgetting that a lot of VNs also have multiple endings that all work together to further flesh out the lore, like in Chaos Head's case. Oh, but they could just adapt chapters, I hear you say, which I do think could be an interesting way of doing it, but even so, visual novel chapters are just that, chapters of one big whole rather than volumes that can be adapted 1 or 2 at a time, and make sense on their own. In the end, Carl awards the first episode with a rating of 2, which yes, both reviews were just of the first episode. I suppose there wouldn't have been much positive to say if they took from a reviews of the entire series. This sentiment of the adaptation being shit hasn't changed over the years either. Its rating on anime list sites still sits low, and anytime the anime is brought up, the person asking is promptly pointed to the English translation of Chaos Head Noah, not only because the visual novel is better, but the original Chaos Head visual novel, of which this anime adapts from, was released with only 3 endings, and the Noah version boasts many great changes, including upping the ending count from 3 to 10. This version only just got an official English release in late 2022 after many hiccups along the way, and is the first official way to experience the visual novel in English. Fan translations of the original Chaos Head did exist, but of course you'd need a PC, the game in some form, and then you'd have to patch it. So the easiest and most accessible way to experience Chaos Head was through the anime for a good while. Despite Chaos Child, the visual novel's thematic sequel, getting an official English release a few years after Japan. Oh, and that also got a shitty adaptation too. Now then, time to see for myself what makes this adaptation so atrocious. My expectations going into episode 1 were that this was going to be bad. If it's not so bad it's good, I'll probably be left bored out of my mind, but instead I found myself actually enjoying it despite its very obvious flaws. First of all is the pacing. The first episode blitzes through the first hour and a half of the visual novel while also moving things around. But although everything did happen really quickly, I think it flowed nicely and the ball of suspense kept rolling as the episode went on, if that makes sense. But that's also another issue. The episode did keep me engaged, and I do think the way they handled Takemi's paranoia was good in the first episode at least, but in a different way from the original. In the visual novel, Takemi's constant state of paranoia was unsettling, and would never fail to make me anxious at what was going to happen next. His internal monologue constantly droning on about endlessly horrific scenarios, and having the perspective be in first person always made me feel like I was actually being watched. Whenever Takemi would look behind him, I would half expect to see something or someone standing there, and the claustrophobic atmosphere of Takemi's cargo box was only accentuated as you could go ages only seeing one side of it, which was actually half of the whole thing, and every turn of the camera would only reveal piles of junk everywhere, and a small sofa before reaching the doors to the cargo box. The anime, taking the perspective away from the first person, basically eliminates all fear I once had upon hearing whose eyes are those eyes. Instead, I felt excited with the way the music complemented the quick camera movements and the brightness of the room, like I was going to be jump scared or something. In the visual novel, whenever Takemi was about to have a delusion, something called the delusion trigger would activate, allowing the player to pick between a good or bad delusion. Good usually being something perverted and bad being, well... And in the anime, the delusions they show suit the mood they're going for in the episode, which makes sense. Honestly, as a first episode, even though it was lightning quick, it kept me engaged, and if I hadn't previously been a fan of Chaos Head, this probably would have got me interested in reading the VN. So if you're watching this and it seems like something you'd enjoy but you're on the fence about committing to the VN, you could try the first episode of the anime in my eyes, but nothing past that for reasons I'll get into soon. The anime's faster pacing gives a quicker payoff to all the suspense that's built up over an episode and the whole series, which past the first episode I do think is a huge detriment. But in this case, the first episode feels like a bit of a taster, as compared to the visual novel dragging on and on with Takemi's internal monologue, which is missing from the anime except for some situations, and even then it's reduced to a few lines, rather than upwards of 5 minutes being stuck in this paranoid loop of what do I do, someone's out to get me and whatever else, until my anxiety reaches a boiling point and I'm literally on the edge of my seat when what's actually happening is quite uneventful on the surface. The removal of Takemi's internal monologue also changed the way I saw him in the adaptation. Like I said before, there's a lot of paranoid deliberations going on in his head at every moment, to the point of questioning whether what he's seeing is a delusion or not, which I really liked. Whenever something seemed too far out, I'd start thinking, there's no way this isn't one of his delusions right now, only to get it thrown in my face when you find out it was, in fact, reality. In the anime, the question of whether what he's seeing is delusion or not is only presented when introduced. So it didn't even cross my mind that whatever weird shit Takemi was seeing could be a delusion until it's revealed or it's plainly obvious that it is. This is just one of the things that ruins Takemi's characterization, with the next taking us back to the pacing problem. In the visual novel, a lot of time is spent, again, in Takemi's head. Alone. In his cargo box. Alone. Walking home. Alone. Shopping. Alone. For the first 2 hours, there's this overwhelming feeling of isolation, save for Nanami's appearance and her genuine love for her brother. His unhealthy lifestyle and lewd delusions paired with the new gen madness amplifying his paranoia makes his existence seem truly miserable and hopeless. In the anime, less time is spent alone, as they rush to introduce all of the important characters that swarm him during the course of the VN. So I didn't really get the sense that this was the same socially inept loser that was in the visual novel. He still came off as a loner loser weirdo, but he came out of his shell really quickly and is somehow able to process all of this unbelievable shit that's happening without many second thoughts. Takemi's characterization isn't the only thing marred by the pacing though, with many things cut and changed as with visual novel adaptations. I'm not going to go over much since you already get what I mean, but there is this one moment in the visual novel that absolutely got me, man. It was so good. I'm going to be really vague about it, but everything leading up to this scene and what happens during it had me locked in, and it's something I think about when I think of Chaos Head. But all of that is just missing from the anime, and it actually frustrated me not seeing this show up, because it got me even more invested in the narrative and characters in the original. Another cut part is Takemi's delusion where he lives the last moments of all the new gen victims. This was also cut from the mobile, PS3 and PSP releases of the VN in Japan and later when the game came west. although you can restore it through the Committee of Zero patch both for PC and Switch, or if you know Japanese is included in the PS Vita and Xbox 360 versions of Chaos Head. As I said before, I like watching anime adaptations even if they're poorly rated because I find it exciting to see my favourite scenes animated, and Chaos Head was no different. I did get a kick out of seeing Takemi's delusions actually moving now, and some of the action scenes found later in the visual novel benefit from actually being animated now. Problem is, the animation is shit. Of course I've seen worse, but this is just not good. Characters' limbs will sometimes be stretched weirdly, body proportions will occasionally be off, and the faces, oh god, the faces. As I said previously, the action scenes do benefit from being animated, but honestly they're not good at all. What sword clashing does happen is cool, especially like the effects on the D-swords, but most of the fights are just yap 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 yap. Thanks in part to the source material being, drumroll please, a visual novel. These fights aren't just mucking about with fake swords, they're clashes of opinions and ideals. So there's a lot of talking in between exchanges which isn't suited to animation at all. This is also evident in other parts of the series where characters are simply having a conversation. A good example is this part in episode 2 where Yui and Rimi are talking to each other for half a minute. There's only so much movement in a conversation between two people, so while they're talking they leave class, then people run past. And just before parting ways, Rimi turns her head slightly and we get a dramatic zoom into Yui's face. I do appreciate that they at least made it somewhat entertaining, but this kind of stuff is present throughout the series which made me nearly doze off each episode. The music in this anime is just not great. I'm not sure if any of the music used appears in the visual novel, but I didn't recognise any of it. During the more suspenseful scenes, this one piece of music is always used and played way too loud. It's actually so frustrating because I can't stand listening to it. Outside of that, it's all really forgetful. One good part though is that ISA's voice actress is still here along with her vocal songs. She also does the OP to the series, which is quite good in my opinion. The visuals, however, not only is the animation shit in what usually gets a lot of effort poured into it, but it's one of those openings that spoils the series, and not even subtly now, like come on. It's not only Yui Sakakibara who comes back to voice the character however, the rest of the main cast also reprise their roles for the anime, and give great performances as they did in the original.
Taku, あなたに会いたかった。
なんで僕の名前を一体何がどうなってるんだ
But that's in Japanese. Yes, that's right. With the 2011 Western home video release of Chaos Head came the English dub of the series. I watched about half of the series with the dub to see what it was like, and it's not offensively bad, but Takemi has been horrifically miscast. Todd Haberkorn is not a bad voice actor, not at all, but Takemi's way of speaking, like he's struggling to get his voice out of his throat with it constantly shaking and stuttering, isn't present whatsoever in the dub, and it's so frustrating. There's no awkwardness or anxiety present in his social encounters anymore, just Todd Haberkorn.
なんだよ ついてくるなよ僕に何の用だ
それは
Who are you? Why are you following me? Please, tell me what you want from me.
Well, you see, I wanted to... 気にしないでください。
フィギュアには触らないでね。
はい。
It's nothing. Don't pay attention to me.
Please, try not to touch the figurines, okay?
Okay, but...
これはきっと罠だ。こんなエロゲみたいなご都合主義的な展開が現実に起こるなんてありえない。
This has got to be a trap. Things like this don't happen. This is like some far-fetched plot out of an erotic fantasy game.
Everyone else's casting is fine though, I guess. Really just standard for an English dub. Like they even got Vic Mignogna to play Shogun and Monica Rial to play the nurse. Stephanie Shea plays ISA in the dub, and holy shit, she actually sang her songs. Usually whenever songs come up in anime dubs, it just changes to Japanese, which I can't blame them for not dubbing songs, but being honest, it does feel kind of lazy at times. Just recently in My Dress of Darling Season 2, the characters go out for karaoke, and they all just swap to the original Japanese voice actors when singing.
I didn't know you used a special eyeshadow that you can't sweat off.
And for a scene as short of this, you might as well just dub it. I really do appreciate that they went and dubbed ISA's live performances, and I know this was a lot more common back then as compared to now, but I still think it's really cool to see. The dub translates some things weirdly as well. Like when Momose calls Ban-chan, they translated it as
Bonnie boy.
It really annoyed me hearing that. Kozue's nickname isn't Kozupi in the dub, it's Cozy for some reason.
Really you, Kozue?
Homie Cozy.
And the Garo Froggies are now called Hoppy the Frog.
Gross. The person who designed that should be shot.
You don't know Hoppy the Frog? He's
He's so hot right now!
It's not something I can really fault the dub for, because really quickly it could end up sounding even weirder, at least to me when they start throwing in Japanese words and honorifics. And even then it's an English dub, you might as well translate everything, as we saw with the songs being translated too, so fair play to them for putting in the effort. I personally think that the anime adaptation of Chaos Head has rightfully earned its reputation as absolute crap. While I did enjoy a few bits of it, the majority was extremely boring to watch, and it didn't even serve as a way to re-experience my favourite moments due to its cleaving of the story. So as stated in the beginning, absolutely do not use this as a substitute for the Chaos Head visual novel, because it's not one. I'd say that if you're on the fence about reading the VN, you could either give it an hour or so, or watch the first episode of the anime. Yes, it does change stuff, and yes, it is way too fast, but it functions as an effective taster in my eyes. You're thrust into Takemi's anxiety-filled world as the tension and confusion boils throughout the episode, culminating at that final hook at the end of the episode that I think could hook some people who are interested. But even so, if you have the time or you like visual novels, then jump straight into Chaos Head Noah. You can get it on PC and Switch in English, and hey, the Switch version is available in the Chaos Double Pack, which comes with Chaos Child, the thematic sequel to Chaos Head. One problem is the censorship in these versions, which includes removing an entire scene. I skipped over the scene after like the first minute in my time reading Chaos Head Noah patched, but of course it's still better to have everything there. And apparently these versions also have some translation problems, so I would highly recommend that if possible you download the Committee of Zero Chaos Head Noah fan patch. The link to this patch will be down below, but please do not be swayed by this. If you can't download the patch for whatever reason, you should still read Chaos Head Noah in any way that you can. It's genuinely a great work that kept me invested in guessing during its entirety. The anime feels completely different to the visual novel, not only because of the things that they removed and changed, but again, because of Takemi's characterization. He feels like a completely different person to the one in the visual novel in my eyes. I know I didn't talk a lot about the things that they changed and removed, but I feel like it's quite self-explanatory that it would be a bad thing that they've removed and changed certain things from the original. So I wanted to focus a lot more on the characterization and really just the other points like animation, music, and voice acting and so on.